Oi, oi! Punchestown Day 1 starts tomorrow. It's a decent festival every year anyway, and it's also quite nice, the timings of the races, the fact they go into the evening, so most of us that are working can still get to watch some decent racing of an evening. Obviously, there's lots of time as well with the fact that those races are later in the day, that like money can move a market during the day and things can change, but I just wanted to get my Day 1 sort of preview out because... spoiler alert at the start, very few, if any, actual bets for Day 1 for me. Declarations, it's 9:45, I'm calling this. The declarations for the Wednesday were coming out, so I'm going to spend a bit of time this evening, going through that and the handicaps, just to see if I can find any juice tomorrow. I mean, the next day, I think there's a chance. But I'm going to quickly run through each of the races and give my thoughts. Again, I'll keep it fairly concise, but... let you know what I'm thinking, or what I was thinking beforehand in a couple of races as well. So the Mares Novice Hurdle listed race kick us off, 3:40. Just think there's a lot of inconsistent horses in here that like you can make a case from. You can sort of see why the market's made up as it is, although Dino Blue's a little bit short given what she's actually done. Lunar Display was one that I mentioned through George a little bit. For the Mares Novice Hurdle at Cheltenham, didn't really work, ran at Fairy House and was pretty much battered there. Can't really want to make a strong case for her anymore. She's 130 rated though, so I still do wonder whether she's got a little bit of a chance, but again, it's I'm just mentioning her for the sake of if she goes in, I wanted to mention her, but wouldn't be a race I'd want to play in the slightest. Then we've got the Champion Novice Hurdle, the Grade 1. Awesome to see Sir Gerhard, Dice Like Dynamo going up against each other. I know I've not mentioned Mighty Potter in that instance, but I do think it's between those two. I do also think that Sir Gerhard deserves to be favourite. Now, Dice Like Dynamo, obviously I liked him for the Supreme. Price-wise, he was, yes, a bit short. When we talked about it in the January preview, when we talked about the race, and he was a 14-1 poke and Constitution Hill was the 7-2 poke. I was saying about what they've done to date of the two, which one you'd rather back at the shorter price, and it would have been Constitution Hill. Same obviously applied when it comes to Cheltenham, even though I did still stick with Dice Like Dynamo. He was, I think, there's no way he would have got close to Constitution Hill at Cheltenham, but he definitely would have filled the gap in between, and obviously he did plenty wrong by jumping out to his right and things like that. Now, it's a different course. We know he's been good at Punchestown before. It is a smaller field as well. Obviously, the change into Patrick Mullins riding him, and I think he rode him in a couple of bumpers, it doesn't bother me. I know that he's a horse that is a bit free and things like that, and obviously ran away from him at Cheltenham, but I just wonder whether he might be okay-ish this time with Patrick. But again, it's one of those, it's a question mark thing around him, isn't it? And I think the question mark around him causes the issue with wanting to back Sir Gerhard when he's a 4-6 poke, because I think it's there for all to see that if Dice Like Dynamo doesn't fall, and Dice Like Dynamo running back right-handed around Punchestown with the way that he jumps and things like that, if he's on his day, I think most people would believe that he's got a chance of doing Sir Gerhard in. Especially over this distance. Not that it won't suit Sir Gerhard, but obviously that was a testing conditions at Cheltenham, and he goes and wins there. I don't know. I just think you can't bet in the race, but I'll come on to something later that I've done as a very, I think, low-risk strategy, which could come back to bite me in the arse. But it looks a nice race, but I don't see the value in there and getting stuck in either, or trying to get something done. Then we've got the 450, which is a handicap hurdle over 2 miles. Now, this is a race I have spent a little bit of time this morning going through, and it's fairly obvious to see the way the market's been shaped up in this, I think. And I think it's also fairly obvious in some of the horses that might warrant a little bit of support, or we might see some support for in the market. Now, a few of these ran at Fairy House against each other in the race that Glan won. Glan won that with a little bit up his sleeve, I think, or up her sleeve. £7 rise, you could see her going well again, but she is the fav. I would argue short enough in a race I think a few have got chances in. Ardler's another one where I guess the chance is there for all to see. 125 rated, form with horses that maybe looks better now. Banbridge obviously went and won at Cheltenham, was only a couple of lengths behind Grand Jury, even a flat run behind Jesse Evans. I know Jesse Evans hasn't really stacked it up since, but I still think it looks like okay form. But again, short enough. Esky Lane's in there. I'm not convinced he's a 146 horse, but again, there's bits of form that maybe work out well. I think he's run the last day, looked more preppy for Punchestown than, whereas with the same yard as Glan, both for Gordon Elliott, whereas Glan, I think, was ready to win that day. Davies ridden Escalane twice, the two biggest prices he's ever gone off in both his runs, 14s and 16s. He actually ran with credit at those prices, so don't know how we can read into that, really. Far out for William Munnins, Paul Townend. He was sent off Fav in that race at Fairyhouse. Never ran well. I do think he's got a bit of a chance, but again, it's like semi-punty. He ran in the county as well, with Felix de G in there, and they're off the same terms, like a pound receipt is what Far Out gets from Felix, and there's a neck between them. So I think those two are fairly matched-ish. And we're going to come on to Felix in a little bit, but those ones towards the head of the market, like he is punty, but I think Far Out has got a chance. Don't think Eights is terrible, but I don't think it's very inviting either. Then Henry's got a few. Great Bear first run for him. Not a massive fan of that. Clifton Warrior, not a massive fan of that. Goa Delarge, that's going to be Rachel's mount. Looks twice at this. Win back in November at Fairyhouse looks pretty good with Magic Tricks and Glam was in behind. Quicker ground does suit. Not entirely sure this is his track. Couple of runs around here and a couple of double-digit distance defeats. About 12 to 1, probably about the right sort of price. Could run well, but I don't know. Tempo Chapter 2 was sent off 13 to 2, joint favourite at Fairyhouse. Not in the same handicap that I was talking about some of these other ones, but in his own right. Clinically abnormal after. Paul Turner said he never really travelled in the race. They put cheek pieces on first time here. I think he's a bit interesting, to be honest with you. You go back through some of his form and it doesn't jump out, but there's some runs behind Indigo Breeze, El Fabiolo, even the run at Cheltenham where Danny Munnins rode him and he was a 40 to 1 poke. Like he's finished 12 out of 26. Fairly quiet enough ride out the back. And then, like I say, he was backed into favouritism or joint favouritism in that novice handicap hurdle at Fairyhouse. So this is a more competitive probably race, but it's a good opportunity for him. I think the first time cheap pieces will help. Maybe 14 to 1 just looks an okay-ish price. There might be one at a bigger price. The one I'll probably will be having a bet on, well, I say I will probably will, I'll have a bet on, but wouldn't be anything like serious. I've talked about some other ones that I'll have a bet on a fancy and make a bit more of a case for him. I think this, as I've already mentioned, plenty of horses. I think it's fairly competitive, but Felix de G, also running that Fairyhouse race, starting to look a bit more like his old self. He's had a pretty busy season this year. And he's now down to a mark of 138. He was a grade 1 winning novice hurdler at Aintree. That was a photo of him where he crosses his legs as he jumps over the hurdle. It's an awesome pick. He's got good Punchestown form as well. 1, 2, 1, 5, 1. And those were in grade 2, grade 1, grade 2, grade 1, and then a bumper. I do think it's a bit of a punt on him because he showed a bit of more form recently, but he is on the decline in terms of rating. And he has had lots of runs this season to show a bit more sparkle. But he's a 16 to 1 poke. He has already been nibbled by William Hill. I think tactically, Gordon's got a couple of horses in there where it would be suited if there's a fast pace. I feel like if they might send Felix on, and that was how he was at his best when he was a hurdler. So I'm sort of hoping that he is fairly prominent. Again, when it comes to betting, like if you're looking at the exchanges, sometimes in these big handicaps, where a horse can be positioned can really affect what the starting price will be or when to maybe back them. Horse like Langadam went off at 8.4 as his Betfair SP because he's a hold-up horse, and lots of people tend to smash the ones at the front of the market, or the front of the race anyway, that they know that they can sort of bet to lay. I wonder whether Felix might be one of those, like if he starts to line up, he might end up getting smashed. And if he doesn't, then it is what it is. But I'd just argue with that I'd happily back him before I see him near the start of the race, in the hope that they do go more prominent with him, because if they do, that's a positive, and his price will shrink, I think. And if they don't, I still think he's got a bit of a squeak. So Felix will be a bet, but you can tell there's not a lot of confidence. Looks a nice race to watch, though. Then we've got the William Hill Champion Chase, the Grade 1. I was looking really to be having a bet on Chacon Poursoir. I watched the Punchestown races back from last year. I talked about him being a great bet against Allaho last season. And Ergamine was very impressive in his novice chase win. And I feel like when I'm watching them back, I feel like an Ergamine was probably more impressive, even though Chacon Poursoir did beat up an Allaho. I think the race is between the two of them. I do still think that Chacon Poursoir can do it, but there's an underlying feeling in me that I'm just a fanboy of Chacon Poursoir. Obviously, he pecked at Cheltenham and then unseated Patrick. But in running, I know Shishkin was out of it, but he traded, I don't know what the price was, but he traded shorter in running there. And I'm not saying he would have beaten an Ergamine, because an Ergamine was massively impressive, but nothing else in the race really got into it, did they? I feel like Chacon Poursoir especially with the way the ground had gone. I know it would have suited Energumene too, but I feel like Chacon could have been there or thereabouts, but we just don't know how it would have panned out. I was sort of hoping for 2-1 plus as my initial thought in the aftermath of Cheltenham. He is about 7-4 top price now. After rewatching the races last year, I do feel like Energumene probably is going to win this race, but the closest Chacon Poursois gets 2-1 is one of those on the exchange. If he starts going like 9-4, sorry, I'm going to have a little bet on him, but it wouldn't be one I'm going to be steaming into. It'd be more for the fact that I just wouldn't want to let him go at that price. What I talked about earlier with the Dysart Dynamo, say Gerhard, I was looking at doing, and I have done, a block bet between the two races. Now it's terribly like low in terms of how much money you might be able to make, but I've blocked Chacon Poursois, Energumene, Dysart Dynamo, and say Gerhard. If you did it without like changing the weighting of your stakes, so say there's 4 bets, say you did it for a tenner on each of them, Energumene and Sir Gerhard at the price they are, you're going to make a small loss on the bet. And then if it was Chacon Poursois and Dysart Dynamo that had gone in, you'd make like more than double your money in terms of return. So you wouldn't lose everything if those two came in. So your £40 isn't totally at risk, but obviously it is because anything can happen. But you could weight the stakes. So you could put a bit more on the Energumene Sir Gerhard double, and then you could stagger it down. So you have a bit more on Energumene and Dysart, and then a bit more on Sir Gerhard and Chacon Poursois. And then the last one, the Chacon Poursois and Dysart Dynamo, you could drop it down. So I could potentially talk about that a little bit more in comments and stuff if you need me to show you the calculations for it. Basically, you can look at the prices, but if you bet in with someone that's got best odds guaranteed, you could work out what those lines are, so that I feel like basically off of your £40 stake, you could guarantee some money back if the worst couple came in or whatever the results they are, or you could make it so that depending on some results, you can make a few quid. It would ultimately be putting like a £40 bet on, in that example where I was saying doing it for tenors, where you might be able to nick yourself 50 quid out of it. So it depends whether you want to back a 1-4 poke, hoping that, so Gerhard, Chacon Poursois, Dysart Dynamo or Energumene, they're the only ones that win. So again, sort of clutching for the sake of a bet, but that was just a thought process and I thought I'd mention it. The Land Rover bumper looks good. Lots of big names in there. Nothing I would want to be getting stuck into. Massively a race just for watching. The Champion Novice Chase, over 3 miles. I was massively excited to lay Bob Ollinger. I think in the anti-post market, I think he was odds on 4-6. Racing Post Tissue comes out 8-11, which they will change that. I feel like I could flip around the screen now, but he's 8-11. Go on the Race Post website, you'll see it. They'll change this because they don't want to look like they're idiots. If he was odds on, I'd have been laying the pants off of Bob Ollinger because A, I'm not sure he wants the 3 miles. B, I still don't really like his jumping. And C, he was crap at Cheltenham. Now, I know they said there was an injury and or there was an excuse for it, but look at what Envoy did. Envoy had the excuse at Cheltenham, obviously fell, whatever it was, didn't really like it, wasn't really travelling in the race, but then goes and gets battered or pulled up at Punchestown. Now, I feel like if Bob Ollinger had Gallup and Deschamps stood up, we'd be more looking at him thinking, well, it could be a bit of a bigger price. But that's why he is a 13-8 poke, I suppose. He may go a little bit bigger. I think he probably should be about 2-1 poke because there is still the potential that he is the classiest horse in the race. But I was looking to lay him, so I can't lay him now when I thought I'd be laying him at 4-6. He's now a 13-8 poke. So we'll see with him. 7 runners in the race, so from a place lay perspective, you could argue it's not so good. If you had 8 runners, it'd be an extra place, he'd be a shorter price. But then you could also argue with the 7 runners, it's almost perfect to lay him 2 places because he could finish 3rd, which would be underperforming, but you've got more horses that could do him in for the place. So I might have a little look at that, but it wouldn't be a confident one. If I was doing this recording and he was 4-6, I would be telling you that I'm laying him for a chunk of cash. But he isn't that price, so he's not. Then we got the cross-country chase. No point even talking about it. I'm not interested. And then at the last, there's another bumper, which isn't as good a bumper, but there's still some nice types in there. So again, wouldn't be looking to punt. Would be looking just to watch. So that summarises day one. Apologies that there's not really any bets in there, but just thought I'd talk you through it and put it up there anyway. I'm going to go through Wednesday's card because it's going up to 10 o'clock now, so the decks should be coming in fairly soon. And then, yeah, fingers crossed there'll be a couple of bets across the days. And like I say, I will have a little bit on the likes of Felix de Gea, and I might end up playing Chacon Poursois he's a little bit bigger. But these are ones that, like, as much as I would be having money on them, I wouldn't necessarily be fully advised bets. Like I wouldn't be saying, oh, I fancy this, go and do it. Much like with the Grenadine thing at the weekend, and then there was like Samarive that I put up in there as well that obviously went and won. Sort of method to the madness of why I'm backing him. Like Samarive obviously did go and win. something like a Felix Digi, I'll take a bit of a punt on them, but it wouldn't be one I'd be overly confident in. Whereas with the Grenadine, when I tell you that I really fancy one, you'll know about it. And there are chances throughout the week. We've got 5 days of Punchestown, so like I say, I appreciate there's not much from a betting perspective in here, but I'll do these every day, and then fingers crossed we can get 1 or 2 decent bets in. Be lucky with your bets for the day. Let me know in the comments below anything that you do fancy or anything that I might have missed, and I will see you tomorrow.